So, thank you very much. Right. Hopefully I grabbed your attention with the title for this presentation, The Internet of Things Living in the Age of the Terminator. I was concerned actually more about Skynet than I was the Terminator himself, and for reasons that I hope will become obvious as we go through this presentation. And obviously I want to talk about the Internet of Things, starting with, well, what do we mean by the Internet of Things? It's a name that can cover a multitude of sins. Where are we now with regard to it? Where are we going? And I hope the answer isn't to hell in a handcart. How did we get into this mess, which I guess kind of answers the question above, and what should we do about it? And in some ways, this does sort of build on a couple of the themes that have been mentioned previously by our earlier speakers. I'm pleased to see that we seem to be roughly in alignment in what we're thinking about it. So without further ado, and then there'll be some questions at the end. I should say that immediately after I've given this presentation, I have to dash to the airport to catch a plane for business meetings. So please don't think, I'll just wait and ask Dave at lunchtime a question. I won't be here. It's nothing you've said, it's nothing personal, it's just business. So what do we mean by the Internet of Things? What is it? Well, it's a multitude of things. And for this presentation, I'm going to concentrate on the home Internet of Things rather than the industrial one. Now, I've only got about 35 minutes speaking time. Now, there isn't time to cover everything. So we're talking about anything, any device, connected anywhere at any time, to anybody, any path, any network, all sorts of things that we can add into the home. And it's got multiple protocols, there are multiple frequencies, there's a huge range of hardware. There is little or no effective security, and we'll come on to that in more detail. There's lots of deployment going on without planning how it's all going to work, and there are lots of land grabs going on for market share. And in many ways, it's a bit like the old VHS versus Betamax format wars. Who's going to win out on this one? So with all these devices about, and these things are more prevalent in your home already than many people realise. And by the way, this isn't new. Anybody else remember the internet connected toaster? Yep. Literally, there was somebody in 1990 built a toaster that you could connect to the internet and turn it on and off and say how brown you wanted the toast by how long you left it on for. And then in 1998, wonderful April spoof, the Hypertext Connect Coffee Pot Control Protocol, which was really good. That actually came out of that grew out of a joke. Cambridge University Engineering Labs actually had a coffee percolator with a webcam attached to it, so you could see. Was there any coffee left in it without having to go down 4 floors of stairs? But it grew from there. So this kind of thing is not new, but it's taken time for the capability to catch up with the ideas and for the technology to become cheap enough for people like you and I to go and order it from Amazon or other suppliers are available and buy this kind of stuff and put it in our homes. The other thing that's growing, I'm sure you're all aware of the forthcoming smart grid network or smart metering network that's coming. It's going to be starting rolling out in a few months' time. We're going to put something like 53 million smart meters in homes and small businesses across the UK by 2020, 2021. And this effectively is going to provide connectivity into your home. First of all to the meters and ultimately to some of the other devices in your house as well. This is going to provide a huge backbone connectivity for these kind of things to communicate with each other, hopefully securely, and it will connect us to the network operators and so on and so forth. But it provides an infrastructure that lots of people are going to start linking things to, and this will be commercialised in ways that as of yet we can't imagine. And this also adds, so there's not just the ordinary internet, but you also have this Internet of Things utilities network that exists starting very shortly. So where are we now? Well, the Internet of Things is gaining an ever-increasing presence in our homes, and consumers, as we know well, do not understand the security risks of these products. And as several people have said, Fred mentioned it earlier, there is no profit in making IoT devices secure at the point of manufacture. They do not see any point in doing that. And I I wish I could cite several examples of that firsthand, but I'm under NDA, so I can't. But I can assure you that it is absolutely true that some manufacturers, when asked, what do you want to do about security in this product, have said absolutely no, have said we don't want to do anything. It adds money to the design process and it adds costs to the finished product. We don't want to do it. Just forget about it. And of course, there's this issue, as I talked about, with the IoT protocols and standards. There's still a huge bun fight going on. It's far from being settled. These are examples of just some of the pieces of kit that are already available you can put in your home. From alarm systems through to cameras, and remember that picture, we'll come back to that piece of kit in a minute. The smart meters, both gas and electricity. Smart thermostats for heating, ventilating, air conditioning. Access control, keys, audio-visual systems, even telehealthcare is something that's being talked about, all running possibly through some kind of smart hub in your connected home, plus, of course, your standard connection out to the internet. So that there are these devices and many, many others. If I got them all on this screen, there wouldn't be room for anything else. You wouldn't be able to read the text. So all this kind of thing exists, and I know these things exist. I've been talking to people who I work with, some of whom have rolled this stuff out already. I've been talking to other people working in the sort of industrial control system, operational technology space, who've also been playing with this stuff at home. We've got a lab set up for this now at our Technology and Innovation Centre, I'm based just outside Cambridge. And we get some of this stuff in. And all I can say is that the dent in the wall is getting increasingly bigger every time I find another vulnerability in this stuff. Let's go back to that point I made about consumers not understanding the risks. Simple little flowchart. Consumer buys box, takes it home, plugs it in. Consumer looks online for help into how do I get this thing to work. Success. Consumer is now happy. Doesn't consider security issues. They rely on the manufacturer, the supplier, to have got security in there. Well, it's going to be fine. I can trust them, can't I? And they have absolutely no idea what's happening to their data or where it goes. Absolutely none. And I'll give you some examples of that. But it's plug and pray all over again. The reality is there is self-configuration with dynamic addresses, which of course change every time the power cycles. Now that's all very well if it's just a one-off, single item, you might be able to get away with it. But what happens if you want to set up static addresses? You want things to talk to each other. So for example, you've installed an alarm system and smoke alarms, and you want the smoke alarms to actually sound the alarm system in your house as well, say if it detects smoke to try and make sure you wake up. What happens if you've had some kind of problem, you had a power cut and all the addresses have changed and won't talk to each other anymore? And then how do I find my IoT devices? If I'm trying to do some kind of network audit and look for stuff, do I have to look up open usability interface header addresses? Do they have specific IP version 6 addresses? Can I specify one and set it? Do I need to use modified EUI 64? Do they even all support the same protocols? Probably not. What I need is some kind of Internet of Things C3PO in my home. Something that will allow them all to talk to each other at the moment. And that's not just a protocol, that's the frequencies. And the replacement of these devices when they die or we decide to upgrade is going to be a real pain. So, do I need a DHCP static list? What happens if my smart thermostat dies and I get a new one? Or there's a power cut? How do I get it to then talk to the boiler again? How do I get it to talk to, say, smart valves on thermostat on radiators? Now, do I have to reconfigure everything? The public is not going to want to have to do that. A lot of the public won't know how to do that. We're going to end up with all sorts of technology that people buy, and very quickly it effectively becomes a brick, or they just want to throw it away, and they'll become disillusioned. Mind you, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, yes, example, again, smart thermostat. Say I've set it frost protection mode. I'm going away on 3 weeks holiday to somewhere nice and hot and sunny, avoid the worst of winter, and I've set it in frost protection mode. We have a power cut, the device reboots, oops, suddenly it can't talk to the boiler. I come home and find I've got burst pipes everywhere. I'm not going to be very pleased with that. Can I then sue the manufacturer because they've done a really appalling design of the product? Probably not. And how do you know if your device is secure? This is an actual ICS cert alert for a home audio, well, it's a home or commercial audio video system. The kind of system you use to pipe music or TV all around your house using one of these new smart systems. These things already have vulnerabilities in them that are actually being formally notified. And of course, if I can find this, so can any criminal out there who wants to look at systems. There we go. That's a picture of it. That's the actual unit that's fitted in people's homes that can give them trouble. And I come back to the statement I made about there is no profit in making IoT devices secure at point of manufacture. In my personal opinion, and I say that for legal purposes, the evidence suggests that manufacturers either don't care about security, don't understand security, don't test properly for security, think it's somebody else's problem, or any or all of the above. And I can see a lot of people nodding in the audience. There just isn't security in these products. Yet, those of you who haven't heard me speak before, you probably realise by now I'm not someone who sits on the fence. I will just get up and say what I think, which is probably why they keep asking me to come back. These products have all sorts of holes in them. And the trouble is, there are so many of them being rolled out. There are so many of these things out there that have vulnerabilities in them that it makes them an easy target. Here's another example. This comes from the Register. I'm sure most of you read it. It's always good for entertainment and education. The train thermostat. April 2014, they were notified that there were vulnerabilities in it, including hard-coded SSH passwords. It took them a year to fix the problem. And then when they did fix it, they didn't tell anyone they'd done so. So when they finally put the patch out there, they didn't make a song and dance about it, presumably because they were worried about the reputational impact. So they fixed some other bugs as well. People have got these devices, they don't know they're insecure, they don't know there's a patch to make them secure. Now this is just a classic example of the kind of problems that people face these days. Here's another one. Here's an example of a paper that was given at Black Hat 2014 about the Smart Nest thermostat and about the problems in it. Google spent $3.2 billion acquiring a company, and then they just proceeded to market an insecure piece of junk. Well, I call it a piece of junk. It does act as a thermostat. I will give you that. But it's that one that you may have seen in the press. If you program it for 2 weeks to act in thrust thermostat mode, anyone can just do a drive-by attack, see that, oh look, that's what you programmed it to do, I'll come back and burgle your house later. Thank you very much. It advertises the fact that you are away. The other thing to remember, of course, is, as was talked about earlier, there is money to be made from data. Electronics manufacturers have found a way of making us pay to put electronic spies in our home that will give them data from which they can make money. It's great, isn't it? They're paying us, or they're making us pay to spy on ourselves. It's marketing genius and privacy hell. Oh, hang on. Here's a phrase that anybody else remember Scott McNealy making this statement? I realise that no, this comes back to that cultural issue that was mentioned in the previous talk. As far as Americans are concerned, you have zero privacy anyway, get over it. The trouble is a lot of this equipment is designed and built by American manufacturers. A lot of the services are run by American companies. They have this cultural difference. We may be here in this country, we may have these laws, but again, as I mentioned previously, there's a clash of heads between the EU and what our regulations say, and between what the Americans actually want to be able to do. And as we've seen, the American government tends to have a habit of ignoring everything that everyone said and just doing what they want anyway. So we get illegal collection and abuse of data by nation states. We also get the problems of illegal use of data by cybercrime. And we get the problems, here's an example. Another article from the Register. A $17 smartwatch, which when you download the software that syncs it to your smartphone, it starts pinging data out to an IP address in China. Thank you. Funny enough, I won't be buying one of these. This is just one of the examples. When I buy a product, I expect it to do what I want and only what I want. I don't want it to be doing stuff like this. This is one of the reasons why I haven't got any of this kind of kit at home. Now, I've got some in my lab, and we play with it, and we find all these kind of problems. But how do these people expect to achieve marketing success when this kind of activity is going on? This is that camera I mentioned that I said to remember earlier, the FOSCam. Anybody here read Krebs on security? Yeah? So Krebs, he has some interesting ideas, but this is an interesting factual piece he put out about 2 weeks ago. This is a webcam, IoT webcam, and P2P traffic is enabled by default. If you go into the menus and disable it, it still does it anyway. It doesn't actually change its behavior. It makes regular outbound calls to this IoTC platform.com, which is registered to a Chinese company, and they have this wonderful press announcement saying that they now support more than 100 million IoT connections. You can imagine how many of these are cameras like this, which they claim are simply pinging a heartbeat back to their server, so that if you use your app, it knows it can talk to your camera. Do any of us trust that to be the case? Would you put one of these in your home after what you've just seen? No, I didn't think so. This is the kind of irresponsible behaviour that we are seeing from manufacturers. These are the kind of problems that we have to face, and it's down to people like us to try and find the answers to it. So that brings me to the question, where are we going? Well, we have increasing connectivity. There are increasing commercial and regulatory pressures on manufacturers, on service providers. We have this smart metering I've talked about that's being rolled out across the EU and increasingly across the US and other places. We have increasing functionality. We have increasing bandwidth, and we are decoupling location and function more and more. Now, I have an app that allows me to, I could have an app that would allow me to turn on my hot water when I'm on the way home, or to look at a webcam and make sure my house was fine whilst I was on holiday on the other side of the planet. No, just because something's possible, do I really think it's a good idea to do it? Probably not. So where are we going? You may have seen the reports last week. The UK National Infrastructure Commission has called for a raft of regulatory changes to create, they call it, a level playing field for energy storage and demand flexibility. What that really means is successive governments have comprehensively fouled up on the policy for generating electricity in this country. There isn't enough generating supply. We're running dangerously close to running out. Not having enough at peak load times, and so they're trying to find ways to nudge people, to influence people into using less electricity. One of the ways they want to do that is to enable the electricity suppliers to talk to your appliances and get them to either turn themselves off or wait until a lower peak time so that they will run. So in other words, not everybody runs their washing machines when electricity is in shortest supply. But that means they've got to be able to talk to them. This is what your system currently looks like at home. So you've probably got an internet connection through your broadband provider, you've got a boiler, you may have a smart thermostat, which may or may not talk to some application or other, and that's a fairly simple system. Now you've got a hub, you might have some fixed devices, and that's what it looks like now. But within a few years, it's going to look like this. You will have an in-home device, communications hub effectively, talking to smart meters installed in your home. And I should say that even if you say that you don't want to have the smart meters installed, when your existing electricity meters reach the end of their effective design life, they will be replaced with smart meters whether you like it or not. You won't have an option. Those devices will speak to things like your smart thermostat. They'll want to speak to your washing machine and your fridge freezer. But at the same time, you may have one of these fridge freezers. There's talk about ones that will order food for you. When they run out of stuff, it will place an order. You might have seen now Amazon, they have little tags, Dash. Anyone come across Dash tag? It's like a tag which apparently you can press, which sends a signal saying, I want to automatically reorder this product, please. These are the kind of things that link together. But the trouble is, you link them together, you start bridging... Oh, that wasn't what I wanted to do, was it? you start bridging the gap between the smart metering network and your broadband network. How secure is that? I was a security architect for the UK smart metering network, and we spent a lot of time figuring out how to try and make these things secure against attacks from nation states and organised crime. But will the design functionality that we put into these kind of devices be in your fridge freezer or your washing machine? I doubt it. How do you make those things secure? How do you stop those being used as a compromise route to get into the smart meters, or from the smart meter network into the rest of your home? No one's thought about this properly. No one's come up with an answer. They're just starting to roll out a system that's got potential vulnerabilities built in. What happens then when we start adding telehealthcare to this lot? What happens to the reliability of this system and to the privacy of your medical data that's being passed across it? How do we make that work? How do we try and keep these two things separate? As you can see, this problem is just going to get bigger. It's going to get more difficult to solve these issues. So, if you think it's bad now, just wait 5 years. And we've talked the how do we get here point. I've mentioned already we have these multiple protocols and frequencies, wide ranges of hardware, and these land grabs. Hopefully this is starting to make sense now. Here's an example of the protocol issues. As you can see here, we've got 7 different protocols. Admittedly, the bottom one, Sigfox, is more for metropolitan area networks. It's designed for low power signalling. It's the kind of thing they're talking about putting in rubbish bins so that people only come and collect your refuse when your bin is full, not say once every couple of weeks. But the rest of them, Z-Wave, Zigbee, 802.11ah, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, powerline communications, they're all possible viable means of having IoT devices communicate around your home. All of them are in use in different products. Well, the thing is, how do I get them to talk to each other? Each one has advantages and disadvantages. As you can see, the higher frequency ones, these are great for bandwidth. They're good for sending lots of data. So say I want to send stream HD or 4K television to another device in my home, 5 gigs is probably what I want to use because it's got the great bandwidth. However, with that bandwidth becomes reduced range. So some devices will use 900 megs. Now they'll talk about 100 kilobits a second, which is okay for discrete messaging between devices, but you're not going to stream real data with it. Bluetooth, well, yeah, some devices are using that. Again, it's probably got about a 10 meter range and it's got very limited node count. You can't integrate that many devices together. Zigbee, this is one that Zigbee is one that you need to keep an eye on. This is what's being used for communications in the smart meters. So the in-home device that you'll get that has a display on it and does the communications, and also the devices that you have in the meters themselves will be using Zigbee. So that's going to make it very popular because a lot of people are going to have it anyway, certainly in this country. But that still raises the issue, if I go out and buy different devices, does the general public know that these things may not be working on the same frequencies? How would I get a device, say I buy an alarm system that works on Z-Wave, how do I get it to talk to a device that's using 802.11ah, which is the IoT version of Wi-Fi? It's going to be rather tricky. And that's just the protocols. When we come to the standards, it gets even worse. These are all the different organisations and bodies who are trying to put together standards for the Internet of Things. Obviously, some are more concerned about functionality. Some are blatant products. I mean, down the bottom here, now you've got the Bosch Home Connect system that's announced a couple of weeks ago. The Apple HomeKit's been out for quite a while now. Now, they're obviously concerned about branding. And of course, the thing to remember with these standards and the protocols themselves, a lot of it is about marketing and licensing. If I'm the one that wins the war and ends up owning the intellectual property that everyone's using, I can make a fortune just out of licensing it to other people. That's why there's lots of people competing in this space. That's what I mean by the land grab. People are getting stuff out there now. It's back to the point Fred made. People are more concerned about getting a product out to market than they are about security of it. They want something to sell now. I mean, I can understand in part it's about trying to regroup the R&D costs they put into things, but a lot more of it is about gaining market share and getting a better negotiating tool at the table when people finally agree what the standard is going to be. We had the same issue with, as I said, video recorders. We had the same thing with CDs and DVDs, and so it goes on. But all these people are working on different protocols. Of course, there's conflicts. Ultimately, there will be some form of evolution and adoption and getting together. But right now, I'm not prepared to put my money on which one of these is likely to end up as the victor. I really can't tell. Well, what should we do about protecting these systems? Why am I concerned? Why do I think that we run the risk of building a proto-version of Skynet? And the problem is the increasing interconnectedness of these systems and services creates vulnerabilities that are taking us to the point where cascade failure is almost inevitable. That's my view. Why would that happen? Well, nation states could do it. This could be for what you might call a vulgar display of power. No? Mr. Estonia, you have annoyed us considerably by moving a statue. We're going to turn your country off for a week. Or the Ukraine, the black energy attacks, the stuff they've been doing to disrupt the airport, the power supplies, and so on and so forth. These are classic examples of people trying to use cyber as a means of influencing and exercising power. Of course, they can be used for espionage and enforcement. And cybercrime. Pay up or we'll turn you off. It could be done. How many million bitcoins do you think they could get for avoiding turning off a small country that hasn't got a viable means of defending itself in cyberspace? They could even go to a manufacturer. We've got a vulnerability in one of your products. Pay up or we'll brick every single one that's out there. What would that do for your reputation? Yeah. If I can destroy every single webcam or every single thermostat that you've got on the wall in every nation across the world, are people ever going to buy products from you again? This could be a good way of making money. And of course, there's Shodan now. Shodan makes it easy to find this kind of stuff. Not just for seasoned criminals, but for anybody who knows how to drive a mouse. It's remarkably simple. So there are all these different means and many others that, no, I'm not going to cover in half an hour, that means we have a problem. We link all this stuff together, we are making ourselves so vulnerable to attacks, especially when you combine that with the fact that we've already mentioned that these things are just not secure. And that brings us on to cascade failure. A failure in a system of interconnected parts in which the failure can trigger the failure of successive parts. Now, this is a concept that comes from communications and from electricity networks, the kind of thing that leads to rolling brownouts across the Americas that you may have heard of. The kind of problems that you can get where basically part of the system fails and it brings other parts of the system down with it. Now, those can be because something has overloaded, and of course that might not be an overload simply of power, it can also be an overload of data. A broadcast storm, effectively. I can just jam the network. I can bring everything down. And whilst the network tries to rebalance itself, quite often you end up just playing whack-a-mole. Now, you try and fix one part, another part spurts up and we have a problem. And when you have so many vulnerable devices out there, how difficult is it going to be? What if I can infect a device and cause it to start beaconing traffic or beaconing infections? If you looked at the studies of the slammer worm, I think the estimates are that in less than 15 minutes it had infected 80% of the vulnerable systems around the planet. If I can release a vulnerability that attacks one of these systems, there is no way that anyone can detect and stop it in time. It's out there, it's too late. So how do we try and achieve some kind of separation? Well, I think the first attempt, and I've discussed this with various of my colleagues around the world, is trying to build some kind of change into home router configurations. Create some kind of IoT DMZ port on the device. I think we should have some kind of open source working group that develops, reviews and tests these kind of configurations to try and separate the IoT traffic from everything else that we do. We should look at trying to build well-known router configurations for all the popular devices that are out there and make them available. The question is, how do we get the ISPs to support them and agree that they're valid? The other thing I talked about, an IoT C3PO, this is an Amazon Echo. This isn't quite exactly what it's intended to do, but it's meant to be something that takes voice commands and talks to other and controls different devices. It's a form of semi-intelligent home hub device. It's got to be something that, for the moment, allows multiple protocols and frequencies to be supported, and allows us to do intelligent optional configurations through a web interface, a user-friendly web interface. It should allow us to look at the addressing and routing issues I mentioned earlier. It could act as a kind of IoT firewall and provide us with alerts if something appears to be going wrong. This could be connected to a port on your router, and again, this builds on that router configuration that I mentioned at the start. This might give you a possibility of something that's plug and play that is vaguely secure and is reliable. So here's an example where I've just shown it logically here. You effectively have an IoT DMZ stroke firewall. A bit like you would if you were putting Wi-Fi into your business network. You cite the point of presence in your DMZ. But this protocol standard is a long way from over. Do I want to buy an equipment when I don't know if it will work in 2 years' time? Do I trust the stuff to behave in a reliable and trustworthy way? Am I prepared to let external agencies have a degree of control over the functionality of my items? Do I want them to be able to turn off my washing machine? How much value do I put on my privacy? And for that question then, should I have the right and the ability to monetize my own data? Should I be able to say to people, actually, yeah, I don't mind you having that data, but you're going to have to pay me for it. If you're going to make money from it, I want my share. Could I do that? Would the kind of configuration I've shown on the previous page make that possible? And coming back to, again, the point that was made earlier, I think the IISP should be a lot more active in these kind of debates. I think we should be preparing press releases on these kind of issues. We've got some remarkable people in this institute, and I think we should ask them to stand in front of the media and say things on this point on behalf of the institute. And we should consider reviewing the guidance being published by other people and contributing to that debate. Now, we spent 10 years getting ourselves off the ground and getting ourselves into a good position. I think it's time now that, as Fred was saying, that we should get out there and start actually expressing our opinion. Now, it's time we had a seat at the big table and we started talking about this kind of stuff and influencing what's happening out there. So as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the reasons why this institute was set up in the first place. And that is what I have to say on this particular subject, and I'm more than happy at this point, if anybody has questions.